Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown, our weekly conversation about things that matter to us as people of faith here in the greater Joplin area. This morning, I think I have a real treat for us. We've not had anybody from our Muslim portion of our community for a little while. It's been a couple years, and I was fortunate enough to be able to make the acquaintance of another member of our community who attends who is a Muslim and attends the Muslim Community Center here, and that is Sahar El-Sayed. And we're going to be right back in a minute to talk a little bit about their practice, their faith, especially for those of you who were not around for any of our shows a few years ago, to talk about some of the things that make us the same and some of the things that make us a little different. But we're going to talk about that and what it might be and how it's experienced to be growing up in a community like Joplin, that's truly a part of a minority part of our community, but one that continues to grow right here in our midst. So as good neighbors, we're going to have that conversation, and we'll be right back after this Mercy Minute, so don't go away.
Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths in the U.S., and now we have an effective tool to screen for it. A low-dose CT uses a lower amount of radiation than a standard chest CT.
Breathe in.
Better detailed pictures than a chest x-ray of small abnormal areas of the lung. A person must be between 55 to 77 years old, asymptomatic, which means they don't have any symptoms such as coughing up blood, chronic cough, shortness of breath, unusual weight loss, or any other worrisome symptoms. They must also be a current smoker or have quit within the past 15 years, also must have a 30-pack year history or more, which equates to smoking 1 pack a day for 30 years, or 2 packs a day for 15 years. People generally avoid these scans, possibly due to fear of what could be found. Like many other cancers, if we can detect lung cancer early, it could be very treatable and life-saving.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning, a member of our Islamic community here, Sahar El-Sayed. So Sahar, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Joplin, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's life like in your religious community.
I am a physician. I moved from Egypt with my husband like 20 years ago. He came to Joplin to join the Freeman team. And we liked the city, so we stayed since then.
Good. So you've been here since
2007.
2007, okay. And are you still are you practicing now as well?
No, I chose to stay at home because I wanted, to teach my kids my native language, and it would be, easier for me to do it this way.
Well, sure. I mean, I think they at least get a sustained burst of speaking in your language, doing it that way. But obviously, they're also learning. They're probably fully conversant in English as well.
Yeah, they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I think when folks will say things like that, some of our Hispanic families say, "Well, we don't want our kids to lose their Spanish." Okay, but the kids, it takes a real intense effort by someone like you or a mom or a grandma or grandpa or somebody to make sure that they don't lose that, because if they're continually around in the culture speaking primarily and mostly only English, it takes kind of a sustained effort to make sure that they don't lose the other language along with.
Yeah, I came from Egypt, right? So the culture over there is totally different. We are open to learning several languages. So I learned English, French in my school. When I came to the States, I was surprised that here the culture is not open to learn several languages. People are kind of sticking to just English, right. And they are not open to several languages.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think that's even less so even than when I was, growing up. In my high school, which only had 200 people, we had options for, French, Spanish, German, and also at that point Latin and Greek. Okay, and of course, we had to take 2 years of Latin, but those kinds of things. And I sometimes think that sometimes in some of our areas, until they get to college, they don't have quite as much opportunity for as many languages. And again, the world is, we were very, certainly when I was growing up, there was no, Middle Eastern languages, no Arabic, no Farsi, nothing. I mean, there was just not, there was none of that, and certainly no Asian languages. So no Chinese, Vietnamese. I'm like, wow. And now when I look at the choices for a foreign language department, say at a university or things like that, I'm just like, whoa. I mean, it's tripled, but it seems like we still have some very limited options at the high school level, and certainly at the grade school level. We do some. I did French at the grade school level. But didn't do Spanish at all. And now, of course, what am I using more than anything else?
Yeah.
Spanish. So, woo, here we go. So I'm glad that. So you're making sure that your kids keep their, some of their heritage and those kinds of things, but also they've got the advantage of also growing up in the United States, of saying, they're going to get some of that culture too.
Yeah.
And for good and for bad. What do you think of the good things that they're picking up from the culture that you like?
So many good things. So they are kind of having freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
They are kind of, giving more to the community. Several things. But
good. Yeah. But those are just a couple right off the top of your head.
Yeah.
What about some of the challenges? And you can be honest with us. I mean, what are some of the challenges, perhaps to them, growing up here? Do you find it as easy, for example, to practice your Muslim faith? I mean, are there challenges to that?
Yeah,
for them?
the challenge is the Islamophobia. People, like I said, where I grew up, our culture was open to learn about different cultures and religion. So I had, knowledge about Christianity, Judaism, about Americans, about French. But when I moved here, I was surprised to find that the American people doesn't have that knowledge about different cultures.
Well, and I find it definitely about religions. As one who taught about religions, I very little knowledge about even what I would consider the Western triad, of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Very little knowledge of some of those things, except for like maybe one course on world traditions or something like that they might get at the high school level. We're very, very cautious about trying to keep all of that out of with little kids, because nobody wants somebody else teaching their kids about religion except themselves. And so we don't allow a lot of that discussion, and certainly don't allow like proselytism. But we at the negative side of it is we also doesn't allow any discussion or learning about in so many instances, because people just get real nervous about that. So yeah, I think that there is it's a challenge for us to try to teach, and certainly we only get the opportunity to do it the older they get, the more opportunities. So I could teach it at the university level and nobody blinked. It's just they wanted to sign up for that course and learn about the way that other people saw the world. That was a good thing. But we don't even teach it that much. I mean, frankly, at Missouri Southern, there's one course on world religions every other semester. And that to me is a real problem, because that means that it's one of the primary ways that the world kind of identifies itself and moves through life. And if you don't have some kind of an understanding of that, it can be tricky. Yeah. So how are you getting past that with your kids? How are you teaching them about some of those things yourself?
Yeah, in our mosque here in Joplin, we get together with people from different faiths on a regular basis. I think this has started after the tornado.
Right.
There's an interfaith group.
Right.
I don't know if you guys have met any of them before.
I used to go to the group a lot. I haven't a lot in the last few years, because a lot of times that Saturday time is just filled up with me for weddings or preparation for the weekend or some of those kinds of things. So it's difficult for me. But I know many of the members of the group and have contributed to the group in its early days, but they had a lot of Christian representation. They didn't,
we have from, we started as a representative from the Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and Baha'is, and now there is also a Buddhist representative.
Oh, good.
So we are, so my kids, they know about it. So we have inclusion. Like the Muslims they are coming from different countries. Most of the people might think that Muslims are Arabs or Arabs are Muslims and that's it. Actually, this is not true. The majority of Muslims in the world are from Asia, Indonesian.
Right.
And the Arabs, like many of them are Christians as well. And there are Jews who used to live in Morocco and in Egypt before they moved to Israel. So, like to say that definitely this is an Arab, so he's a Muslim, this is a wrong assumption.
Well, yes, and I always tell my students that all the time. It's like, you cannot do, you cannot. It's a very complicated picture,
Yeah.
and it's you can't just paint one brush and say. So I mean, it's even in a place that's primarily one predominant religion. So like, for example, here in Southwest Missouri, you're going to get mostly Christian, but you could paint with that brush and say, well, the majority of the culture is Christian. But once you get to that, you really know very little about what kind of they believe is the different sects of Christianity, because that is just all over the landscape. So I mean, I just tell my students, when you get one kind of like a one little sector, but once you get into that sector, it varies a great deal as well. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So good that to kind of remember that here in our area. That's just like, well, this person must be from here, so they must be this, and very often is not the case.
Yeah. And when they see someone who looks Indian or Pakistani, they assume that they are Muslims, and like if they are Indian, most probably they would be Hindu or Sikh, which they are not Muslims. Yeah. So
again, the only way we can do that is to do things like this and have the conversation with each other and do those kind of religious diversity panels. And again, teach our kids, I think, a little bit about religious diversity, which I think is really, really important, especially as we're getting deeper and deeper into the 21st century. We're going to need more of that knowledge base and more of that conversation. Yeah. So do you think it's difficult to be Muslim here in Joplin, Missouri?
For me personally, it wasn't difficult. Maybe other Muslims face some, prejudice, but for me, I haven't. Maybe I'm lucky. I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. I'm just saying, because again, I was talking to the imam, so I mean, he just moved in, and so you'd been here a little longer than he was at the time that I knew him. I don't have a lot of other, contacts, in the community. And so all I can do is go from what your reaction is. I'm going to tell you that I think that it's not always easy being Catholic in this world, because there are a lot of misunderstandings about Catholics, and so I'm forever having to explain a little bit about what Catholics believe or what they don't believe. Sometimes I hear from other Christians that Catholics aren't Christian, So we're going to take a quick break here in a second, but after the break, I want to talk a little bit about about the way that you guys approach that and how you feel, again, a little bit about kind of like fitting in the Joplin area, and just so our listeners can find that out about what some of the things are that you believe and that you teach your kids, because I think that's kind of important. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back. So freshen up your coffee and stick around, and we're going to be right back with Sahar El-Sayed right after this break.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, as I mentioned to you before the break, I'm talking here with Sahar El-Sayed, and we talked a little bit before the break, Sahar, about the fact that you don't find it very challenging or very difficult so far living as a Muslim or practicing your faith here in the Joplin area. So, but many of our folks have never met a Muslim or talked to one. So if, let's just pretend I know nothing about it, okay? Even though I'm smarter than your average bear, at least I like to hope and think, okay? But if I didn't know anything about that, and I was leaning across the backyard fence and talking to you, what would you say? What's your religion all about? What is that all about?
Okay. So let's go with the definition. What does it mean, Islam? Islam is the submission of your will to the will of God. And God that we believe in is the same God that Jews and Christians believe in.
Yeah.
He is the creator of earth and all living creatures and, you know, everything around us. We know him by his attributes and, you know, but by his characters, which he is the most knowing, the all-knowing, the all-seeing, and so on. So we worship God as the way he wants us to worship him. So in Islam, there is no innovation of the rituals. We were sent the book, the Quran, which is like the Bible, and the Torah, which is the Old Testament. So, and we believe in both the Old Testament and the Bible, because they were sent by Allah. Allah is the Arabic word of God. So the Arab Christian, they call him Allah too. Just you know, an information.
Yeah.
It is not a different.
Still got it's a generic name
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
a proper name. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a no. It's one of his names. You know, like we know him by several names, at least 99 names. Allah is one of those names. So we start, you know, like everything we do by his name. So we say Bismillah, in the name of Allah. Allah had sent messengers, and some of those messengers, he gave them books. Not all the messengers and prophets were given books. According to our Islamic teacher, Abraham, he got a book. Moses got a book. Jesus got a book. And Muhammad got a book. Also David got a book. So we have to believe on all those books and the teaching on those books. If you are not a believer in those books, you are not a Muslim. And we know that all those, you know, like we call the rituals the Islamic rituals, right? But the core, the face, is the same face as the Christians and Jews and before them Abraham, because Abraham actually is the founder of Islam. People would think that Islam is the latest religion. No, it is the face of Ibrahim or Abraham. And we are just, you know, like it's a continuation of the message. God have chosen the sons of Israel. He is a grandson of Abraham. He have chosen them and sent them several prophets and messengers and two of the main books, or three of the main books, the Old Testament, the Psalms of David, and the Bible. And then, you know, from his other son, Ishmael, you know him by this name, we know him as Ismail, he got the grandson, Muhammad. So he gave him the other book, which is the Quran. Actually, in the Bible and in the Old Testament, there is a prophecy that there will be someone from the side of Ismail that will come with, you know, like a teaching from God to all mankind. And this is, we believe, is Muhammad. Al-Quran is not, or the Quran is not Muhammad's teaching at all. Right. Because Muhammad himself, he was illiterate. He doesn't know how to read or write. So he met with the angel, Jibril, or you call him Gabriel. Mm-hmm. So he taught him the words of God, the direct words of God. So Quran is in Arabic. You know, like, you know how many nationalities are Muslim? They have to recite it in Arabic. They can, you know, like try to translate the meanings for themselves to understand, but they don't translate it word to word. So the Quran as it was revealed is the same Quran that we have in our hands today. We read it, we memorize it because we use it in our prayers.
Sure.
And of course, you know, like we try to understand the messages that the Quran is giving, and you know, like it reveals more and more as people understand. So for example, in the Quran, there was how God created mankind. It was described in detail in the Quran, you know, like how the embryo is formed from, like a sperm, and then, it becomes like a blood clot, and then how it came in the womb and how it grows. And all this details was described in one verse in the Quran, actually. So we have to go by those teachings, and we have to teach this message to people. But in the Quran itself, it said, you have to tell people the message, but you don't have to compel them into religion. So God wants people to worship with their own will. He doesn't like them to be forced into worship. So to be a Muslim, you have to do this willingly. You have to worship God willingly. He doesn't want, when he created mankind, and before them he created the jinni, which is, like the spirits, he created them different than animals and plants. Animals and plants, they are worshiping God with no, like they don't have a will to disobey. Right. But he created mankind with a will to worship or not to worship. So for you to be a Muslim, you have to have this free will. If you are forced into doing any of the Islamic rituals, you are not a true Muslim. So what's the deal? So there is no compulsion in Islam. This is something, like people are scared of. They are thinking that Muslims want everyone else to be turned into Islam.
And I think that part of the reason for that is, again, when we hear stories from other parts of the world about, for example, not allowing Christians or to worship in their own right, they hear stories about the fact that if, that by them professing their faith, that somehow that is seen as a blasphemy or whatever, and then their lives being endangered because of that. So I mean, when people in this culture hear that, they automatically get fearful. So how would you kind of like respond to that? And again, over the back fence, as we're talking about that, it's just like,
this is, I'm not saying this is not happening. This is happening, but it is not because of the Islamic teaching. It is because of the prejudice of some of the Muslims, So it is some Muslims who are not following the teaching of Islam, and they are just misbehaving. So from, what is supporting my views from history is back in time when they have entered Jerusalem. Umar ibn al-Khattab was like the third Khalifa over at that time. When they, he entered over there, and they actually invited him to pray in the church. So he said, no, I'm not going to pray inside the church, because then Muslims would think that it became now a mosque. I'll pray outside so the Christians can keep their sacred church for their own worship till today. And this church is still there in Jerusalem till today. And who is the keeper of the gate, you think? It's a Muslim family who has been keeping the church. We call it the Church of Al-Qiyamah, but I don't know what is the English name for it right now. Maybe it is Nativity Church.
Oh, the Church of Nativity, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they are the keepers for it, are Muslims, just to keep the place of worship for Christians as it is. They have, the Muslims in the past time, they were trying to make sure that everyone have freedom to choose their religion. So they have fought the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire, but they haven't forced Islam on the people. So for example, Egypt, they stayed for 100 years, only 5% of Egyptians were Muslim. And the rest, they were, Christians as they were. Right. Then, they embraced Islam on their own, when they chose to be Muslims, they changed their religion, but it wasn't forced on them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that with the perspectives, that's one of the reasons why I like to, to teach, because there's so much misunderstanding out there about, that this is a group that's going to take over, or this is a group that's going to force everyone to do things their own way. But I do think, I'll make the parallel for some of our, because since we are, I will look at somebody who, like say there's a Catholic group that goes and does something, And I can look at it and say, well, they may be Catholics, but I don't necessarily think that that's the very Catholic way to act.
Yeah.
Okay? And again, part of your interesting part about that, there's no one spokesman for all of Islam, the same way, for example, that I have, a spokesperson for all of Catholicism. There's no one spokesperson for Christianity either.
Yeah.
And that's why we've got so many different expressions of that and so many challenges to it. Yeah. We got a little less than a minute.
Okay.
Would you want to say anything that if you could clear up any misunderstanding about Islam while we're talking today, what would it be?
That I'm forced to wear hijab.
Okay, all right, good, all right. And it's something you choose to do for your own religious identity, and you think to be closer to, to doing what God wants you to do.
Yes.
Wonderful, great.
Yeah.
We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute, so don't go away.
The whole purpose of screening is to catch people who have a significant smoking history early enough where we can do something about it and potentially improve the duration of life. The minimum recommendation for screening is 30-pack years. So usually people who've smoked more than 30-pack years are the ones that we're screening. If we start screening yearly with low-dose CT scans, we can reduce the risk of death from lung cancer by 20 to 25%. Stage 1, 2, and 3 cancers potentially can be cured. When it becomes stage 4, the possibility of cure falls significantly.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in our hometown. This morning we actually had a real faith discussion from one of our Muslim neighbors, Sahar El-Sayed. She and her husband, both physicians, he practicing here in our community, and she being a mom and staying at home and raising their kids and raising their family. Again, that makes her very much like a lot of the moms and other families here in our area. Teaching their kids in the regular subjects, matters of life, but also teaching them about faith. And again, those are some common things that bring us all together. That's a very common thing that families of faith want to do, is they want to pass that faith on to their children, and they want to do those things. There are so many ways that we are ignorant of the way that each other functions. And again, it's one of the reasons why we do this show is that we want to give opportunities for people who practice their faith to come on and kind of enlighten each other, because we do need to talk more across those fences and those backyards so that we can understand each other a little bit better. Again, we're not all trying to convert each other to our one way of thinking necessarily, even though we believe what we believe because we believe it strongly. So have a great week. God bless you, all of you, in another week, and we'll see you hopefully right back here next Sunday for Faith in Our Hometown.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.